Okay, welcome everyone. This is Hillary Topper here, hi, to We Are Triathletes webinar. And today we're going to be talking about depression and triathlons. And my guest today is Imei Hsu, who is an active retired RN, telemedicine psychotherapist at SeattleDirectCounseling.com. And she's raised a long distance course, a shorter distance course, as well as 50K trail ultra marathons. And she's also a member of We Are Triathletes. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Imei. Welcome.
Thank you, Hillary. It's good to be back.
So let's start off by, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself. And also, if you can give us the definition of mental illness before we get started with the actual depth of the interview.
Sure. So again, my name is Imei Hsu, and I'm a licensed active retired registered nurse and a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Washington. I have to do my little disclaimer because that's the legal part of things, which is to say I'm here to talk about depression and how it relates to triathlon training, but I'm not here to diagnose anyone. I'm not here to specifically treat anyone. So if there are questions afterwards, I can talk in generalities, but I cannot specifically create a plan for you or treat you like as if you're one of my patients, because that's not allowed. To the question, what is mental illness? That is a huge topic. And I know that a lot of us are seeing it in the news right now. For the purposes of today, let me shrink that topic down just a little bit because it is so big, just to talk about what is depression or how would you recognize it? And probably more specifically, how would you differentiate when there are things that you can do to help yourself manage the symptoms of depression, if that's what you have, or that you need more help, like to actually seek professional help. So we'll start from the first part of that question. What is depression, or how do you recognize it? And I'll start with the big piece, which might seem really obvious. You will notice that things feel off. People describe it as feeling like there's a heavy cloud in your life that just does not go away, like a rain cloud that follows you. Some people describe it as actually feeling a sense of heaviness from the shoulders on down. The body sags. You'll actually literally sometimes see people with their shoulders rolled forward because the sadness of life is sitting on them. There can be a sense of doom, like nothing good is going to come out of my life. Gloom, I have nothing to look forward to. And at its worst, it can bring up thoughts of wanting to end one's life because there isn't anything to look forward to. So deep sense of sadness beyond grief that can be more associated with what I would consider a situational depression. For example, somebody loses a loved one, and there is a sense of loss and grief and anger and sadness around not having that person in your life anymore. But that can also change over time as a person adjusts to moving forward without that person being physically present. That's a situational kind of depressed mood. Situational can be a change in job, or you lost your job, or a change in location. You moved somewhere you didn't want to, and suddenly you're feeling very overwhelmed and sad because you're not in the place that feels like home. These are situations of which, by doing certain kinds of things, can eventually resolve. Another situational one could be a change in relationship, a loss or change of a romantic relationship, or the ending of a short-term one that was unexpected. It could be sadness that comes with little things in one's life, or it could be situational in the type that a lot of us experience if we're up in the northern hemisphere, which is seasonal affective disorder, a type of depression that's related to just the seasons changing. And once it hits the period of time where the light comes up more hours than it did in the winter, you see that kind of depression ebbing away and energy returning. So again, back to that question, there's different kinds of depression, but most of them manifest in these very physical kinds of ways. You also see people talk, or maybe not talk. You'll see the absence of something or the presence of something, and that is they will change their sleeping and eating habits. So I can ask about, like, how are you eating these days? It might actually show. A depressed person in a situation might start, hitting the ice cream really hard or hitting the bottle really hard. Mm-hmm. And if it's not in their norm to do that, I can go, aha, this person may very possibly be trying to medicate the symptoms of a depression with drugs, alcohol, or certain kinds of habits like eating differently, a lot of sugary foods, a lot of carby kind of comfort foods to try to take away the edge of that depressed mood. But more often than not, we just start with the big piece. Something feels off. It doesn't feel normal to the person. If it's been a long-term chronic depression, that becomes their new norm. The rain clouds there more days than not. And that's a bit of a different kind of depression, more like a dysthymia that goes in cycles and repeats over and over, somewhat endlessly for years.
So let's bring this back to triathlons, right? So, you gear up for a big race. Some people are gearing up for a half marathon, or others are doing a full Ironman. And it takes them months and months and months leading up to this big day. And the day comes and then it's over. Can you give us some kind of insight about what to do and how to overcome that down after the event is over?
Yes. If you've seen the movie Chariots of Fire, and I recognize it is a bit of an older movie, but it's a real classic, there is a scene when one of the sprint runners, who is just about to run the race of his life, and he's the front runner, he's being told he's probably going to win. He's the fastest man in the world, right? And he's about to run his race, and that is going to be done in 50 seconds or less. And he basically says that after those 50 seconds, his life is over because there's nothing left for him. And when I saw that scene, I'm just like, oh, because a lot of us know what that feels like. You've been working so hard for whatever length, if that's a sprint or a mini sprint, an ollie, a half Ironman, a full Ironman, or if you're really super crazy, you do that race where you do 3 Ironmans in a row. What comes after that, when you've taken your body as far as it can go, and then the mind's going, now what? What do I do now? What is this? Oftentimes what I'll see people talking about or hear them talking about is that they go into this funk afterwards because there was no plan put in place for the moments afterwards when the medal has been put on around your neck and you've gone home and you've got all your stuff and you don't even feel like unpacking it. What happens when you just drop it at the door, flop in bed, and go? So you need to have a plan before that race actually happens. And I suggest that people should actually write down what that plan is. Do not plan to do a race too close to the one you just finished. Because what happens is that all you're trying to do in that is maybe circumvent having to think about the pain of ending this incredible, lengthy buildup and this joyous celebration, and you don't even get to celebrate. You're already popping your brain into the next race a little too close in time. And then I'll hear these same people who thought it was a good idea to, say, plan a race 2 weeks out after their Ironman. They try to do that other race and they have nothing in them. They didn't recover physically, they didn't recover mentally, and they didn't recover emotionally. And so they just sort of go through the motions like a Frankenstein and do that race. Now, that's not everybody. There's a few in there go like, woohoo, that was the best plan ever. If they know themselves, okay, more power to you, girl, go do that. But if you didn't know, this is your first time, I really suggest putting together a plan, talking to others who have done this before, and making certain that you plan some things that have nothing to do with triathlon afterwards, but still engage you. For me, that activity was walking around in the sunshine with a floppy hat on at whatever speed I wanted, leave the Garmin at home, and pick blackberries for hours. I picked bags and bags of blackberries, went home, washed them, froze them, made smoothies out of them, and then ate like a panda bear. I'd lay on my back and just force food into my mouth because I was so underweight after that race. That's what I needed to do to recover. And I checked in with my coach and he's like, how's the recovery plan going? And I'm like, I'm eating like a panda. And he's like, keep eating, eat the bacon, eat the fruit, eat whatever you want, rest. Don't run for a month. Best advice ever for me. Again, it's knowing yourself, but I had that actually as a written plan. This is in my calendar. Here's what I get to do today if I want to. If I want to lay and be toes up in bed and watch Netflix and read a book or whatever, do that. But when you have a plan, it gives your brain something to fall into instead of that place of like, now what? And it has to try to think of what comes next rather than having this written plan that kind of helps guide you when your brain's just like.
That's a great suggestion. On the flip side, can you talk a little bit about what types of strategies someone could do if they get injured before a race or injured for a long extent of time and just feel depressed because they just feel like they're never going to come back, or they're going to come back, but it's just taking a long time?
I first wanted to say and acknowledge that depression, that depressed feeling from an injury is real. Sometimes people want to blow it off and say, I'm just being a baby. This isn't causing me depression. I don't know what's wrong with me. And they want to just diminish it. And so I'm here to say, no, if your body's sending you those sad signals, if you're finding yourself annoyed and cranky and saying, gosh darn it, I don't get to run and walk, or it hurts when I move, or my doctor says I can't get in the pool for a month and I'm missing my swims and I'm really irritated and sad. At first, just acknowledge that that's really what's happening inside your brain. That's what you're sensing and feeling. Again, I like to look at it as, okay, if this is what it needs to happen, that doesn't necessarily translate to your race is over. If that race is far enough out there, missing a month of swimming is not going to kill your race. There are other activities you may be able to do that keeps the muscle fitness and some of the muscle memory intact. There are tools that we have to help stimulate those muscles. I bought a Compex. Apparently I seem to be accident prone. And so that Compex gets used a lot. Hey, right after I find out after this dog bite injury has been officially healed as of last week, that's 6 months. I know, like, yay. The very next day, what do? On a trail run, I slip and fall on ice twice. On the same leg, the dog bite leg, on the same leg. My coach writes me and says, I think you should now invest in a big roll of bubble wrap. Okay, so things happen, right?
Yeah.
Instead, look at the entire amount of time you have. Think smart. Either work with your coach or work with the physical therapist and say, what kind of movements can I do that help me keep muscle fitness, that allow me some movement so my brain doesn't go absolutely crazy from going from, running 25 miles a week to running no miles per week. If you can bike, some of the same muscle movements are carried over in biking from running, and that might help stimulate your brain and your body to say, I'm doing something. I'm still getting some high volume workouts that I can do. I just can't do impact. If you can't do impact from running and you can do it on an elliptical, then you do that, right? So there might be a smart way to train. You can use technologies. If you can't move at all because you have some other kind of illness, for example, people who fight with autoimmune disease can get completely laid out for weeks. They're in a very different category there, and I would suggest both some psychotherapy to talk it through, as well as some very careful planning on maybe scaling back what their goals are for that race, because they're going to have a bit of a longer recovery time than your average person from illness. And that really would affect a race. It might mean that they've got to change races. They might have to delay or put off or change distances even. What they might have wanted to do as a half Ironman might get changed to an Olympic, just because the amount of time and the amount of energy they have. And the depression that comes from that, of having to let go of a goal, is something worthy of talking about, so that that person can still stay motivated. They can still stay on track of thinking, this was a goal that I want to have, and the goal still exists. It just may not happen in the timing that I want.
That's good. That's really good. In terms of some of the solutions for depression, can you address some things, some other type? I know you've already addressed some tips, but some other tips. Maybe it's nutrition. Maybe we need to, take, I don't know, vitamin C or whatever to try to get happy again.
So according to the DSM-5, which is, the big book of mental health disorders, as a clinician, I have to use that when I'm, doing the billable hour, right? There are 5 things that we look at in terms of treatment, or 5 areas. There's definitely talk therapy as an option. So if you think you've gotten as far as you can, I'm working on some of the issues around depression, and you'd like to talk to someone about it, I happen to think it's a great way to go. Supplements and vitamins. If you're in the northern hemisphere and you don't get enough sun, everybody talks about vitamin D, making certain that your vitamin D levels are high enough. Also for, nutrition or the micronutrients, iron is a big thing we talk about, and electrolytes, all those in balance. So maybe it's time to get your blood panel pulled and seeing what's going on there nutritionally, eating to the level that you need to for the amount that you train, as well as hydrating properly falls in that category. For some people, medications is going to be an option for them, and especially with chronic mental health issues and mental health specifically with depression. Some people do very well with it. I happen to be a therapist who starts first with trying to use all the non-medicinal ways of helping people manage the symptoms of depression and depressed mood before I move towards that, with the exception of if somebody's feeling suicidal or engaging in self-harm activities. Now I'm going to put them on a medication. Mm-hmm. I'm going to recommend that just so that they feel safe and kind of stabled out, because they're less likely to act out with some of these medications on board. And exercise, movement, and that does not have to be hard cardio. It can be simple movement like very slow Tai Chi, yoga, where the poses are held and the mind is challenged to actually let go of activity and be stilled through meditation, and slow, purposeful movement can be just engaging enough to help somebody use that as a way to treat depression. And so there's lots and lots of studies recently put out for using yoga with depression. There's actually a book called Yoga and Depression, And some of the authors that are quoted, or some of the researchers that are quoted, came from the school that I actually got my yoga teacher certification from, which is Kripalu over on the East Coast. So I spent 21 days out there and got my certification. Great program. But yoga and meditation are often used. So mindfulness meditation specific to help the mind let go of that suffering thought, whatever it is. Because oftentimes in the treatment modality I use, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, a lot of suffering isn't just physical. It is how we interpret the physical through our mind and what meaning we attach to it. So if I'm injured and I realize, okay, I am going to heal from this in X many weeks or months, this is the projection and it looks good, and I'm still going to be able to race 6 months out, no problem. But the suffering mind might decide to say, but I'm not going to be very fast. Or the suffering mind says, and then that means I'm not a very good triathlete, or I'm letting myself and other people down, or whatever it attaches to. I find that mindfulness is a really great and inexpensive way that you can teach your mind to basically shut up. Shut up. Because all you're doing is repeating things that are not true over and over and causing the mind to suffer in a way that, frankly, I think is just so tiresome that in just learning a 5-minute mindfulness technique to teach the mind to just drop that thought, to give your mind space so that a new thought, perhaps a more powerful one or more wise one, can emerge in its place when you're ready to say, you know, I'm open-minded. Maybe this 4 weeks was a setback, but I'm going to come back stronger. I have a chance to see what I'm made of. And that can empower that person to take the depressed feelings and start to slowly look at them and let them dissipate if that's a possibility for them.
I love that.
I lost your audio for just a second.
Oh, I love that. I love what you just said, and I love that you know, just to turn it around. But sometimes, and I mean, I even get this way, you know, you look on Facebook or Strava and you watch what other people are doing or saying, and then it starts to strike a depression. I'm not good enough. How am I going to do this? And that type of thing. So, I mean, what's that all about? I mean, we've got so much going on Facebook, and, you know, either look at me or I'm feeling self-conscious, or so what strategies do you have besides don't look at Facebook?
Okay, disclaimer here, I put out a lot of things that I'm doing about my training, and I don't do it as a look at me kind of thing. In fact, the way that I look at people's social media posts when they're talking about their physical activities is I don't automatically assume, oh, this person's a narcissist. In fact, posting about the self to me isn't an absolute proof of narcissism, as some people try to make it say. And that's because I'm coming at it as a therapist who understands what the true definition of narcissism is, about the narcissistic wound. And that's not the primary way that it manifests. It always manifests through relationship. So, going back to your question, I think that it can be very healthy for people to let others know this is what I'm doing. Where I think I see people do some things where I'm just kind of scratching my head going, what is it exactly are they trying to accomplish? Is when I kind of sense they're fishing for compliments or a validation. It's not coming from a place of their strength. They're wanting to see if others, one, are interested in what they're doing, and two, if those people would somehow let them know that what they're doing is okay, as if they haven't already answered the question themselves. So it's a very different space if you're posting about what you're doing because you're proud and you're feeling very accomplished, or even if it wasn't the race that you wanted, you're just letting people know what happened and that you're going to continue on because you've already made the decision that this is what you want to do with your life. And it's working for you and you're happy to talk about it. It comes from a place of curiosity about the self, interest, and joy. Versus the posts that I see sometimes, it is like this, that, and the other happened, and I don't think I want to do this anymore. And what do you think? Like, oh, I'm not touching that one. I'm not even going there. I don't have time for this. But you make a really good point, because this very thing was part of the reason why for the longest time I wouldn't be on Strava. I didn't want to have to deal with letting people in and seeing what I'm doing, and then them in turn wanting me to see what they're doing in some kind of competition. Who's doing more miles? Who's hitting it? Who's killing it out there? Because in order to do what I do in terms of my racing schedule, my head has to be in my stuff. My head has to be primarily in my own business. And does that sound selfish? Well, guess, hello, Ironman is kind of a selfish sport. I hate to say it, because nobody else can do it for you. It is what it is. And I just don't want to take I honestly just don't want to take the time of engaging in that kind of competition. And every once in a while, I'll have somebody who's very competitive saying, why won't you let me into your Strava world? And I just don't do that. It doesn't serve my purposes. Now, for someone who's competitive, who's basically invigorated by that, hey, you go, girl. You go get that.
You do see a lot of people writing posts like, oh, I just finished this marathon, I should have done better. Or stuff like, oh, I'm really not that good and I'm not going to be able to do a triathlon. So you see posts like that a lot, and I always feel so bad for the person, and they always get a lot of comments. But I guess you're right, it's like a validation type of thing. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, what I want to just mention is that, here you went through so much with that dog bite.
Oh my gosh.
I think that the entire time, even though I know you were going through such negative stuff, you were always positive, especially on Facebook.
Right. I would post like, here's what's going on with the dog bite, but I'd say, the dog might bite, but the Imei bites back.
Right.
That was, I actually had almost a running list in my head of the positive mantras and comments that I wanted to have running in my head to say, this might be happening and it sucks and it hurts and it's not fair and whatever, but these other things still remain true, because that's what actually propels me forward. I cannot tell you how much pain was involved in the last 2 foot races I was in. The Oregon Coast 50K, which came 6 weeks after the dog bite, and just this last one at Birch Bay, a road marathon that was cambered. And so to run again on it where it's still a little tiny bit tender in the center of the wound was just nauseatingly painful, but not against what my healthcare professional team was advising me to do. They say, you're good to go. You can run this and it won't cause any permanent damage. It was just a mind thing. And I know both logically, physically, and realistically that was going to not allow me to have the finish time I wanted. It took me 20 minutes longer than I thought I could finish it in. But I still made a PR, and I was, I'm able to take from that and say, hey, you may not get everything you want, but it's like that song, you can't always get what you want, right? But if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need, right? You take out of it what you are looking for.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions for Imei? Just no, yes. I don't know. I'll unmute everybody, so just in case anybody has anything. Hello.
It's scrolling through the different phones.
Yeah, I'm just so yeah. So if anybody has any final questions.
Oh, we had one more thing we forgot about the.
Oh yes, that's a great way to finish it up.
So I train in something I call Man Geek's Cave of Suffering. It is a cave that he set up when he was, my husband was training for Ironman. He did 2 Ironmans and 4 halves in 1 year. And we live in the Pacific Northwest. I do not recommend that for most people. We live in the Pacific Northwest, which, you know, rains pretty much from October through March. And some of our years where we've had like 160 straight days of rain. It's not that we're unopposed to riding outside in rain, but when you combine rain and wind, it's pretty nasty and the conditions are very dangerous. So lots of us train indoors. And one of the things that my husband purchased for us is this little guy here. So I'm going to flash this. It's pretty bright. Some people don't think that these bright Verilux or light boxes work well, but other people swear by them, and I happen to be one of those who will swear lots of nice words by them, because that extra light there in the morning when you're eating breakfast is very helpful. Or if you come back home from work, you basically left the house and it's dark, and you come home when it's dark, you need a little bit extra boost. And so for the cost of putting that there next to a trainer and using that time with it on, an excellent little piece of equipment, not super expensive. A lot of them are under $100.
Great advice. All right, well, without further ado, I guess we'll wrap this up. Thank you so much. Imei, can you just give us your information in case anybody wants to privately either email you or call you?
Sure. I can be found on seattledirectcounseling.com, or you can email me directly on IMEI, my first name, period, HSU @gmail.com. And ask your questions if you want. If you're interested in actually working with me, I'm all telehealth now, which means that I use a HIPAA-compatible software program called Doxy.me, made for therapists, to be able to reach out to you under certain conditions, which means if your state allows the use of telehealth medicine to conduct these meetings, and you'll only know if you call your state's Department of Health and find out if that's possible, then we can actually work that way through these telehealth portals.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We have some other great webinars coming up in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned. Thank you all, and happy training.